World Combat Sports. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. You know what it is. Back with another one. This is Muddy Flats episode 7, and it's a mixed martial arts affair. We're going to talk about the backlash that's been going on with the Anthony Smith Glover Teixeira bout that took place of the final 3 that was down there in Jacksonville, Florida. And I got to give it up to Dana White for doing what he had to do. He was able to get some fighters paid, and also himself he was able to put on some shows during the pandemic and give us an entertainment. Those mainstream or hardcore mixed martial art fans that was able to tune in. So I can't say that the trio was all for naught. You know what I'm saying? I think it was pretty entertaining. Real talk. So give me a minute to set this up. And once again, if you're in the building, hit the thumbs up button. I truly appreciate it. And of course, being that I talk about boxing and mixed martial arts, just to explain a little bit about why I call it the Muddy Flats. It's not really the first time I actually spoke on a name like this when it comes to mixed martial arts. I just feel everything about the multifaceted sport has a lot of obstacles that you don't see. And the only way that you get used to it is that you put yourself in the environment. And that's real talk. And you can read in it what you may. I'm not going to go too much in detail, but the name speaks for itself. And all you have to do is just understand, everything that I've mentioned about Muddy Flats. Anybody who knows about it, anything you do in that particular situation, you have to get used to it. I just don't want to bring the military into it, but you put yourself in a wet trench of muddy water. You don't know what's in it. You just have to go in there and deal with it. It's all about the mission. When it comes to mixed martial arts, you don't know what you're getting into. There's so many facets to the sport that a person has to deal with. It just forces somebody to acclimate. And the only way you're going to acclimate to mixed martial arts, you have to put yourself in the environment. You have to continue to train. You have to put yourself on the mat, remediate. And, that's going to be my descriptive title for my mixed martial arts segment from here on out. And when it comes to boxing, it's going to be catchweight. Y'all know what it is. So speaking of Anthony Smith and Glover Teixeira, I want to first congratulate the two by putting on a hell of a show. Glover Teixeira ended up expanding himself to 31 victories, which, in my opinion, that's commendable. You know what I'm saying? I can't take that away from him for doing that. It's one of those situations where Anthony Smith, in my opinion, really didn't need to win as much as Glover Teixeira. And the reason why I say that is Anthony Smith, out of the last 10 bouts, man, you're looking at someone who only lost 3 times. And within that 10, we're talking about Rashad Evans, Hector Lombard, you know what I'm saying? Alexander Gustafsson. He has some pretty heavy names in his last 10 fights, which is very important heading into this fight with Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira, he was he did fairly decent too. When it came to Glover, a lot of people look at him as one of these guys that's had ups and downs, especially when he lost to Corey Anderson via decision, and he lost to Alexander Gustafsson, who Anthony Smith had defeated. You know what I'm saying? Glover lost via knockout to Alexander Gustafsson in the 5th round. But Anthony Smith finished him in the 4th round. So, he's been on like a 3-fight win streak, but it wasn't names that you will look into and say, yeah, these are kind of people that that was tough opposition And I got to give him all the credit in the world for that. So, of course, I look at the whole situation like this fight that happened in the main event. I just, like I told you before, I look at the shit different. A lot of people look at Anthony Smith as taking tremendous amount of punishment. But I didn't really report on the same facet for which the fans was looking at it. And I can appreciate what Anthony Smith had to say about his corner not throwing in the towel. He basically said he hired them to train and make sure he's doing what he's supposed to do in there. He didn't hire his team to be a liability. He kept it 100. Anthony Smith said, I didn't hire them to stop the fight with me. That's not what I hired you for. I hired you to be a team and to be able to identify certain things I may need to do and everything else. And like if you rewind it back to when he fought John Jones, I also said I respected Anthony Smith for not taking the belt the easy way. John Jones in that fight delivered an illegal knee to Anthony Smith, and his corner could have very well said, Anthony, take the motherfucking belt. Regardless of what he has to say, take the belt. At least you can say you was world champion in the UFC at the light heavyweight division. Take the motherfucking belt. But what I respect is that he's cut from a different cloth. Smith is cut from a different cloth. He didn't take the easy way out. He stood up and he continued to fight to losing the decision against John Jones. Now, this particular case with Glover Teixeira, I look at the fight, the first 2 rounds, I was like, God damn, Anthony Smith, he's doing this thing. He's being very active with his hands, very sharp. The pace was a bit faster than I'm used to seeing him press the gas on. And I'm saying he's looking very sharp. If he can maintain this for 5 rounds, potentially he may stop Glover Teixeira. It's been done. Potentially, if he keeps that pace up, he can cause he can place Glover Teixeira in a lot of dangerous situations. And potentially I was thinking he could stop him in maybe the 4th round. But the tide began to change. Glover connected with his hands. He started to work his hands. And like I tell everybody, a fighter can always be susceptible to damage when they're in the process of fatiguing, when their body starts to degrade. And that's exactly what happened to Anthony Smith. He started to get tired. Glover started to close the distance a little bit more, started to work his uppercuts, jabs, hooks, and he started to land. And those shots were affecting Anthony Smith so much to the point where he backed up against the cage. And once Glover closed in on him and landed some more punches, dropped him, was able to have heavy top control. And we all know Glover Teixeira. Come on, man. If he gets on top of you, it's not too many people really, it's just going to say, you know what? I'm going to be able to get back to my feet, no problem. It's only Glover Teixeira on me. No, when Glover's on your back, when Glover's in top position, he has heavy hips. He's very well versed in his BJJ. And most of the fighters that's in that particular community understand that. So Anthony Smith, in the process of being tired, further degrading himself with punishment, taking punishment from Glover Teixeira, the fight turned into, for some people, a beatdown, a pummeling, an assault. The fight turned into something that people that may have been tuned in wasn't used to seeing. You have to understand that Dana White was basically doing a 3-fight calendar in a time where usually some of these fans that tuned in would be more focused on doing other things. If boxing was up and active, these people might be in the gym training and so forth. You might have other boxing matches, whatever the case may be. They may tune in to a boxing card. whatever the process is. But we had more neighboring eyes tuned in to these mixed martial arts card, and they was able to see certain things that potentially, I'm talking about the fans, that potentially they may not have seen previously. And just so happened, I'm not guaranteeing some of these fans seen UFC 249 all the way up to the last fight night in Jacksonville, Florida. So when Anthony Smith started to take that punishment from Glover Teixeira, it looked bad to someone who's just basically tuning in. You know what I'm saying? Like if they're looking at this fight, they never seen Glover fight before. They haven't seen Anthony Smith. They don't know how tough both fighters are. They may be able to easily take a favor, you know, to say, well, this is why I don't like mixed martial arts. Look at this. Look what's going on here. This guy can't fight. They may not know. They may know very little about Anthony Smith when he was on the bottom taking the punishment. But what they didn't see is him still moving, him still defending himself. Though he was taking punishment periodically, it wasn't extreme to the point where he was just getting blitzed and he was losing consciousness. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like when Rashard Evans was on top of Forrest Griffith and he was landing punches and they go to sleep. It wasn't like Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping when Dan Henderson hit him with the right hand and then leaped in the air and crushed him with a right elbow just to seal that envelope and say that's what you get for talking shit. It wasn't one of those fights. It was a fight where Anthony Smith was losing in the third, fourth. The fourth fourth was bad. Fourth, he was in turbulence. The fourth, he was in a tornado. And the damage that Glover Teixeira was giving Smith was what he's supposed to do. That's what he trained to do. But it wasn't as bad as people putting it out to be. And let me touch on some people who I was absolutely surprised that basically projected criticism toward Anthony Smith fight going too long. DC, of all people, like DC is the same person. And look, I'm not taking anything personal when I mention these names, but DC, Daniel Cormier, a person who pretty much wrecked the heavyweight division in Strikeforce coming over to UFC, right? A guy who fought light heavyweight because his boy Cain Velasquez. DC has been in some fights. He's a legend of the sport. But we've seen DC dog some guys. And his attitude wasn't like, well, they corner should have thrown in the towel. Because the way I was flipping him and Dan Henderson around, he shouldn't have been in there with me in the first place. You know what I'm saying? You just didn't get that vibe from DC ever to come out and say, well, Anthony Smith fight, I was a little surprised on how long the fight went on. I say this is coming from DC though. I'm trying to figure out, is this like the media, ESPN, the commentator DC coming out? Because he's a tough dude. For him to project that towards Anthony Smith, I didn't quite get or understand what it all meant, because this guy's been in some tough fights. Then you look at one of the winningest fighters in the UFC, Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping, of course, you know, is going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's been in some, I'm talking about the way he talks shit to Anderson Silva, the way he looked in a lot of his fights where he was absolutely losing in a bad place and he came back and rebounded and he was able to defeat the Spider. The way he was able to go in there and defeat Luke Rockhold. I can go on and on about the fights. Michael Bisping looked like the fight should have been stopped. You're talking about a guy who basically lost the eye, being damaged and not really considerably making better decisions in his career to say, you know what, I'm just going to sit this out. He's not built from that cloth. You know what I'm saying? So he would rather fight on and end up losing his right eye. So therefore, you wouldn't go in there and sacrifice parts of your body for the sport you love. But yet, Michael Bisping was criticizing Anthony Smith about, his team about not stopping the fight when him taking punishment. And I'm saying to myself, like, Michael Bisping is taking extreme amount of punishment. Seriously. Them two, I just mentioned, DC and Michael Bisping has been in some wars for real. More so Michael Bisping than DC, because we already know DC's losses. He has really 3 losses, but one was overturned from John Jones testing positive. And then the first one, John Jones beat him. And then the last one, Stipe Miocic beat him. But come on, man. DC's been in some fights. So let me play this little bit of what Anthony Smith had to say about what I just mentioned.
That I think sometimes forget what their other job is. And I mean that with absolute respect. I definitely don't want this to go like, I don't want this to be an Anthony Smith versus DC or Felder or Anik, or I don't want it to go like that. Because I love those guys. I appreciate the hell out of them. And I do care that they care. Like, I appreciate it. I do think sometimes, especially during this whole pandemic, I think people are a little soft.
So Anthony Smith said, I do think during this pandemic, people are a little soft. That's his way of saying in a subtle way that I believe certain people that's had to sit down longer than they used to and commentate on other colleagues or compeers that participate and compete in the same sport for which they make a living, they've gotten soft. Paul Felder. Did you see how Paul Felder looked? Like, Paul Felder has been in some fights where he had a broken arm. You know what I'm saying? Paul Felder, the way he looked and the punishment he took in there when he was fighting Dan Hooker. I was surprised to hear Paul Felder provide Backlash just because he's in a suit and holding a mic, because Paul Felder has been in some absolute wars in his career. And I'm saying to myself, I didn't hear him talking about, I wish my corner would have threw in the towel, or I was criticizing my corner for not even considering stopping the fight. You have to take that all in consideration, that Anthony Smith said he had made it explicit to his corner that if you throw in a towel, you might as well walk back to the dressing room by yourself, because we have no longer a working relationship or a personal relationship. He basically told his corner, don't throw in a towel for me. It's up to me. I can handle it. It's up to me when I'm fighting, when I'm going uphill in a fight. It's up to me to turn that around. I can do it. This is what I'm getting paid to do. And I can understand where he's coming from. A lot of fighters say, you know what, let me go out on my shield. Let me do what the fuck I'm getting paid to do. That's all I'm trying to say. Let me do what I get paid to do. Basically, he's telling you, I know how big my heart is. I know where my headspace is at. I know the depth for which I can survive. Let me go out here and fight the war. Let me go to war. I'm the soldier. Let me do it. So what he just said is people getting soft during the pandemic. I get it, man. It's a lot of people that's sitting around that's unable to get certain fights, or they're not fighting for a reason. I know Michael Bisping is retired, but DC, he's pretty much waiting on Stipe, I believe, right? And then Paul Felder just coming off a defeat with Dan Hooker, I believe. So, for him to say, well, a lot of people during this pandemic is soft, I get it, man. I hear what he's saying. You know what I'm saying? When you don't have to focus on training camp, the gyms are closed, and the speedometer is just a little bit slower than usual. you might go up there and start saying some shit you thought you would never say. Let's move on and see what else he had to say.
I think they're a little soft. Even watching it back, I felt even more like it wasn't that bad watching it back. Like I went through it and I was the person it was happening to and didn't feel like it was as bad as people were making it seem. And
this man said he has watched himself in the fight. And we was watching the same fight where we saw Glover Teixeira dominating the third, fourth, and fifth round until the stoppage in the fifth, right? He said he didn't think it was bad. This is the recipient that was the opposition inside the cage on the main event that was on the bad end of the glove. And he said he didn't see it, he didn't think it was that bad. He's basically saying, I was the one that was getting hit. I was the one that was being punished, and I didn't think it was that bad.
And then I watched it, and I still feel the same way. As far as the fans, I get it from the fans and the media. I understand. Because 99.9% of those people have never done it. They haven't done the work to get there. They don't know.
He said 99.9% of y'all haven't did it. He said we haven't did it, so you wouldn't understand. You can't fathom what it's like to train for a fight. You can't fathom what it's like to go through the remediation process. Be honest, I cannot fathom. I've seen it over and over again from different schools, but to be in the remediation and the practice process of going into training, having to do this for a living, and it's something that you were inspired to do as a person, I totally grasp what his level is on how he view it from the fans' perspective in him throwing the jab at the fans. He's basically saying you haven't did what I did. You can't fathom what I'm going through, the sacrifice that I'm making to go in here and train. You can never put yourself in that position because you're not the person to doing it. You're not the man or woman in the ring. So you can only sit on the outside and talk about it.
They can't even fathom us going into a fight in general. Like that escapes most people, like what it takes to actually step in there and do it.
Escapes.
So I wouldn't expect them to understand when things kind of hit the fan. So I guess I don't really have a lot to say about the fan part of it because I know that they don't understand. Media, I think that there's not a lot of news going on right now, and I think that that was an easy home run. And it's easy to attack people when
he said the media, it's not a lot going on right now, so it's easy for the media to attack people. And once again, I have to check the box on his mindset right now and how he's basically viewing this overall backlash that he's receiving from his colleagues, from the media, from other fighters. You know what I'm saying? That's chiming in on his loss. You know what I'm saying? I understand where they're coming from, but I don't. Especially his colleagues that's actually been in the cage and been in some tough fights. On the other hand, what he said about the fans, 99.9% of them can't fathom what it's like. He's right. He's right. They can't even escape the fact they're on the outside looking in and they don't even know what it's like. It's just like the fighters that train in combat sports. It's easy for media to report on it, but more so the respect is given to the ones who's competed internal to the sport. When it comes to these fighters, some of them, they'll give you more respect if you actually compete in the sport. No matter how good your journalism is, right? They'll still come back and say, you never competed. Because with journalism, you're not always gonna fancy the person that you're speaking on. It's always gonna be something good and something bad.
When things don't go your way. And sometimes I think there's media members in our sport that thinks that their opinion is the only one that matters. And if things aren't that way, then it's outrage and anger. And again, there's not a lot of news right now. So like this is a big story because the fans were kind of being sissies about it. So
for those of you that's very verbally sensitive in this time, right? The word he just mentioned, sissy, is a word that I pretty much, mentioned growing up. There used to be a commonality sometime when you're just talking shit to somebody. You say, "Oh, sissy, man, you're a sissy." You know, it doesn't have anything to do with at that point in time someone's sexuality, right? It has something to do with you just being straight up punk. You being a punk about it. You're a sissy. You scared to do something. You shouldn't be scared. You should have all the courage in the world, but you're a sissy. You scared. And that's what Anthony Smith just mentioned. I'm pretty sure a lot of his people are like, oh my God, he said sissy. Yeah, you know, people still use sissy, but I remember when I mentioned that shit, when I was still active duty, man, I said, man, you're a sissy. And people was just all uptight. They acting like that's a word that has an abrupt halt to everything that you ever did in life that was good. You call somebody sissy. You call somebody a faggot. They all think they want to correlate it with one instance. That's not the case, man. It's almost like calling somebody a punk. You know what I'm saying? It's just an alternative slang to call somebody that shit.
As far as my colleagues, you know, I do find it odd that like guys that are as tough as Michael Bisping, Daniel Cormier, and Paul Felder are upset about like me being in a tough fight. You know, like, and that's how it feels like to me. Like I was in a tough fight, things kind of, you know, hit the fan and it didn't go my way. But how many rounds has Paul Felder fought with a broken arm? You know, like you can fight with a broken arm, but my teeth being gone is too much. Like, come on, dude. What are we doing here? Like Michael Bisping, in the biggest fight of his life with Anderson Silva, when he got knocked out at the very end of the round, for the beginning of the next round was a dead body and was able to fight back, was given the opportunity. That's all I wanted was the opportunity. And if it didn't go my way, then it's on me. And then he goes in and wins the biggest fight of his life. And it is a legend because of it and because of his toughness and the tough fights that he's been in. You know, it's just, I guess I don't get it. Like, and maybe some of it is they're just completely being media members on that side of it. And that's how they look at it. But like, I feel a little bit betrayed, you know, like I feel like.
Did you hear the B word he used? He felt betrayed. Do y'all understand, you know, why he would say he felt betrayed? The reason is because he has what you call his comrades in arms, right? In combat sports. They're doing what he's doing for a living. They fought in the same type of arena. You know, they pretty much in the same full-time job, right? So him mentioning the word betrayal is guys that's behind the microphone and they have another call of duty, all right? DC, Michael Bisping, Paul Felder, and whoever else that's behind the mic. I wouldn't say too much Dominique Cruz, all right? They have another call of duty outside of going in there and knowing what offensive strategy they want to delegate. Now they have to fall back. They have to digress a little bit. They're not in there with 4-ounce gloves, trunks, and going in there trying to beat somebody down. But yet they have to now articulate and try not to be extremely non-biased. I mean, extremely biased to someone who they've seen fight. They pretty much understand the whole course of action that's in front of them. But yet they got to provide something that's different from what people would expect. Because if you get fighters will go in there and talk the same way because they trained it. They trained in the sport. So they might dilute a lot of stuff because, oh, that's not that bad. That's not that bad. That's not that bad. So when you see somebody like Anthony Smith that's taking punishment, but yet he's still defending himself, it would be surprising for somebody, you know, in that particular sport or that particular occupation to criticize somebody else when they've actually faced the same type of turbulence. They actually been in the same adversity. They fought with injuries. They fought when they was hurt. They fought to try to earn that victory. And that required them being bloodied, bruised, battered. And if you came back and you was able to win, people respected you even more, right? So I understand why he's using the word betrayed. I get it. That's the guys who he expect to understand what he was trying to do. He wasn't in there quitting.
I'm very honorable when it comes to talking about other fighters and other guys. And if I ever had like a really big issue with something, I feel like instead of attacking them online, I would call them and say, hey man, like, you know, maybe we messed this one up, or maybe we missed something here, or like, how could we do this better? Like there used to be a brotherhood, you know, and maybe I'm just, you know, I guess I'm the last of a dying breed of kind of the old guard and the old way of doing things. But I would just never blast them like that, you know, like I'm just in there fighting for my family and trying to accomplish my goals. And then here I am, you know, I've looked up to DC as long as he's been on top, you know, like looked up to Felder, and I've told Felder this before I was even in the UFC when he was commenting for the CFFC that I looked up to Felder and the way that he fought, and I have nothing but respect for Anik. He's done nothing but help me try to flourish and grow on the media side with how Anik looked at it. And again, I don't saying like stop being a sissy, dude. Like I guess I don't know if people don't know this, so we might be making breaking news here. Social media is not like the real world. Like I don't know if everybody knows that, but who gives a shit what people say on Twitter? Like who can?
Now he's mentioned social media, and I know listening to Anthony Smith, for many fans, you want to, you know, some people gravitate to the rise and inflection of someone's voice. You know what I'm saying? For you to tune in, I get it. Anthony Smith can be pretty banal if you want to think about it. You know, the way he's just sitting up here talking, and you know, it's not. But when you're in journalism and media, or if you're in school or any type of curriculum that you're really focusing on, any type of genre of learning that you put all your effort into, right? You're going to learn about it, period. And in this case of mixed martial arts and covering it, you sometimes have to report on individuals like Anthony Smith that people really don't want to like tune into. Like he's not the most flamboyant fighter like Conor McGregor. He's not a trash talker. When him and John Jones was about to come on deck, he really didn't sell the fight. You know, it was much more John Jones. The little trash talking that he was able to do to Anthony Smith, oblige him with just to sell the fight. You know, John Jones. But the way Anthony Smith is talking, just all low monotone, these are the type of incidents where, I mean, these are the type of fighters that you just have to still report on, because the event that they was a part of is a part of history in a way. This fight is being talked about because it was during a pandemic. And I don't think if it was a crowd there, right? I don't think if the silence was the way it was in the arena, people wouldn't be talking about it as much. If, you know, if people just wasn't doing this. You know, looking at these fights during the pandemic, besides UFC 249, the other two fight cards wasn't as heavy. So, like I said before, were somebody going to pay to see the PPV? It did pretty decent numbers. And then they saw the last fight card. They saw Anthony Smith and Glover Teixeira on the main event. You know, it's not enough spark for me to tune in. And you can tell why. You know, he's just a no-nonsense, tough guy that actually has mixed martial arts skills. He can fight. But it really wasn't his night. And what he's talking about right now, you have to really pay attention outside of his low, monotone, you know, just listen to what he's saying. It makes sense. I totally get what he's saying. Real talk. I get where Anthony Smith is coming from in this.
Who cares? Like that's their job is to be people on Twitter. Like that's who they are.
He's talking about social media, Twitter, and it's not reality. And in the fight world, in the celebrity world, it is. It's a sense of reality that is sort of making fights this day and time. You know, how do you think the Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather fight was made? Over social media. How do you think Ronda Rousey started getting all the radiation? You know, the radiated love from the fans that she was getting outside of defending her title in the bantamweight division in the UFC. She was talking shit about Floyd Mayweather. People was actually believing that Ronda Rousey, as poor as her boxing was inside the arena, they truly believed that Ronda Rousey could beat Floyd Mayweather. She was talking like she can defeat Floyd Mayweather with one hand behind her back. Could you imagine Floyd fighting Ronda Rousey? Could you imagine him fighting her in a boxing match? He would play with her. He would have played with her so bad that the fans would have turned on him for exaggerating the point. You know what I'm saying? People would have been like, Floyd, you didn't have to do it dirty like that. You did not have to do it like that. But Ronda Rousey started talking shit. She got her ESPN award, and that's how she started. So Anthony Smith, that's why I kind of disagree in this particular part of his narrative, that sort of kind of social media has come a brutal reality. Real talk. Fights are being made first from social media. If the fans are talking about it enough on Twitter, during this pandemic, it's been the first time we've seen some of these fighters actually take and start trash talking one another the way they are, because there's nothing else to do. So they want to hop on social media. So it's a reality, y'all. Social media is absolutely a commonplace this day and time that you have to be concerned with. If you Anthony Smith, especially, you have to be concerned about that shit.
I don't understand. Like, I've never let social media or like what people say affect the decision. Like, if I think I made a bad decision, I'll go back and look at it, evaluate it, and if I think I need to change it, then I do that. But I'm not going to do that because other people think that I need to. And that's my issue with Jason Herzog. Jason Herzog is a phenomenal ref. He's really good. He's very, very good. And he did his job, and he did it correctly. So now that, you know, there's a little bit of heat because people are in their feelings and they can't handle it, he wants to go back and apologize. Like, what are you apologizing for? Like, and that's what I meant when I said that's a coward move. Like, don't because social media, because Twitter is mean, you're going to go back and think that you have to make a different decision
Now, this is what I'm talking about with Anthony Smith. He's speaking from his heart, and he's saying what he mean and mean what he say. And he's talking about the referee, the extra attention that he's received post fight of him allowing the fight to go on as long as it did. Now, this has happened. We've seen referees in the UFC, especially, and boxing, take heat from certain decisions that they made to either stop a fight too late or stop it prematurely, depending on the fighter that's in there. People, if they believe a certain fighter was supposed to win, you know what I'm saying, and they was getting beat down, the fans may want that fight to keep on going because that fighter, to give them their time to recover. But yet and still, if you have a fighter that's not supposed to win, you know what I'm saying? A fighter that's not supposed to win, and he's beating up the fighter. Same thing, right? Let him survive. But what about if the fighter that's supposed to win is actually handling business and he's punishing that fighter? He's punishing him. Do you allow the fighters that's not supposed to win to fight his way up out of an ass whooping and let him be the delegator? Do you allow him that opportunity? You know what I'm saying? If he's the least favorite fighter and he's still in there, he has some fight in the game, right? He's still giving forth and putting forth effort, but he's still taking punishment. Do you allow him to continue to survive so we can see what the outcome will be, or do you stop the fight? It's a two-way street, man. It's all dependent on what fighter it is. What's their reputation? What's their body of work? What's their history? And should the referee even allow certain levels of brutality to extend? Like when we watch Nick Diaz, they've been known to bleed like I don't know what. Like you watch BJ Penn, you watch the Clay Guidas, you watch the Diego Sanchez. You know what I'm saying? You've watched Stephen Bonner and freaking Forrest Griffith when they had their fight and they was just dropping bombs on one another. You watch the infamous, legendary Diego Sanchez and Clay Guida. You watch the legendary Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald. Both of those fighters are known to be tough in that particular situation. So the referee might have let the shit go on and on. But when you look at Anthony Smith and Glover Teixeira, people are criticizing the referee because it was Anthony Smith. The same Anthony Smith that subbed out Alexander Gustafsson in 4 rounds. Stopped him. The one that went 5 rounds with John Jones. So the referee is sitting up here kowtowing to those Twitter warriors that are criticizing him for not stopping the fight early. Now, they're human just like we are, Jason Herzog. He's human just like everybody else. But once again, I totally get where Anthony Smith is coming from in this. You know why? Because you just can't sit up here and be in a position where you have to make command decisions, and then you turn around and let fans influence you to second guess what the fuck your profession is. These fans are home key delegates, y'all. They are sitting behind the home keys, and they understand what it takes to put a thought process together and press enter. That's it. No one that's criticizing a person that's actually trained in that profession, and he made a command decision to stop the fight when he did, he shouldn't let unqualified individuals sway his decision. That's not what leaders do. The referee is in some way, shape, or form a leader as the third man in the cage. He absolutely is. He or she absolutely is a leader. So when you make the decision in this Glover Teixeira, Anthony Smith, and you stopped it when you did, don't sit up here and be apologetic to people who are all encased and comfortably sitting behind a keyboard, projecting anger, when if you ask them anything other than what they know of the mixed martial arts or anything else, they probably couldn't tell you shit. But I know what they can do. They can put together a cognitive thought process. They can mesh together characters and make a sentence, whether it's good or bad, and they can send it. If they have a Twitter account, IG, Facebook, or whatever the case may be. But Anthony Smith called this man Jason Herzog. Say it was a coward. When you use that C word coward, that shit splits deep. When you are telling someone, yeah, that's a coward ass move right there. You know, I think you was a coward for doing that.
Appease the masses. That's like I make it a point before every fight in our fighter meeting to know exactly what their commands are and what he expects out of each one. And I did the same exact thing before the Glover fight. And so I know what to expect when I'm going in there. I know what the ref is going to do. And I responded accordingly, per his commands right before the fight. So what are you apologizing for? Because you can't handle the heat on Twitter? Get out of here with that.
Anthony Smith said, you can't handle the heat on Twitter? Get out of here with that. This is a man who fought off a burglary in his house in the AM, early AM. The man is cut from a different cloth, y'all. That's why I always tell people, like, he's not the most exciting dude, but you can't sit up here and deny that he isn't tough. He isn't cut from a different cloth. He isn't courageous. He isn't a fighter. He doesn't have dog in him. You know what I'm saying? His mentality of thinking is like, you know what? Don't allow individuals that are interacting on social media to come up here and dictate or influence your professional decision. You are trained at your job, and you actually the third man in the cage, and you're in between two fighters who are competing for one of them to win. So therefore, if you felt the need to stop the fight when you did, stick by it, own it. Don't let anybody else sway you downward. You know what I'm saying? Don't allow somebody to vilify your decisions, devalue it, and make yourself look stupid, all because of what you're hearing on Twitter. He said, get out of here with that shit.
Same thing with my coaches. Like, they're like, I just don't like that's just the way I fight. Like, things are going to get a little heat. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of heat. Like, if you can't handle it, maybe you're in the wrong business. And
so when you, sorry, go ahead.
That's my message to them. And I reiterated the fact that nothing changes. So if this is too hot, then get out of the kitchen, because this is how I run my career. And like, I need you guys to help me win, period.
So when Jason Herzog, the referee, who has a great reputation, came out with that statement on Friday saying no one is to blame except for me, what was your reaction when you read that?
You're being a coward.
Were you surprised that he did that?
Yeah, I don't need you to take the heat off of me. I don't need your help. You know, like I made the decision with my coaches a long time ago that this is how this was going to go if I ended up in this spot, and I was okay with that. And then I made the decision to have that conversation with Jason Herzog to make sure that I knew what he was going to want from me if I ended up in a bad spot, or if Glover ended up.
Do you recall handing him your teeth, and were you afraid when you did that he would stop the fight?
Yeah, I wish I wouldn't have done that, because it's the aesthetics of it that just look like, you know.
So he's talking about is that during the fight, you know, the adrenaline and everything. Anthony Smith pretty much handed his teeth was coming out. All right, he has some veneers. He's in the fight game, and he's about to transition into the point on where he basically handed his teeth. And when he mentioned the aesthetics of it, yeah, it looks very bad. But once again, listen to me, hear me out on this. When you're talking about the fight game, and just say somebody hand you their teeth, that particular referee has probably been in a fight where that's not the only tooth. Those are not the only teeth that he's ever witnessed coming out into the canvas, right? And for a fighter to be in a situation where, you know, he cannot basically hold his mouthpiece in because, you know, some of his teeth are in there. And we know the mouthpiece fit differently if you start to miss teeth, in which he's going to get to. You know, Ariel is asking him about how did it actually, you know, what's the process and why did it even happen? Do you think that has something to do with Jason Herzog? I mean, what's your take on handing him your teeth? Because aesthetically, yeah, it looked bad. You know, your teeth are coming out and you're taking a beating, and Herzog could have very well felt sympathy for you and called a fight.
Right. I looked down. Glover hit me with like just a little pop shot, and my mouthpiece kind of jiggled down in the bottom of my teeth. And I just looked down and my teeth were right there. And for whatever reason, like, I don't know if I thought I was going to put it back in or what, but I was just like, oh, there's my tooth. You know, I just grabbed it. And then I had it in my hand and I didn't know what to do with it. So I just handed it to him. But again, I wish I wouldn't have said anything about my teeth, because that was when the media started picking up on, oh, he's knocking his teeth out. Like, I guess I missed the rule that said you needed all your teeth to fight. Like, in the grand scheme of things, I've been in way worse situations than just a couple missing teeth. You know, I've been one-handed more than a couple times. And so it's really not that big a deal. And I wish I wouldn't have handed it to him, because it just looked bad. The aesthetics of it is just not good.
Did Jason Herzog speak to you after the fight?
No.
Have you talked to him since?
No, I don't think there's a reason to. I was just
curious if he apologized to you. If he was apologizing to the world,
I wouldn't have accepted it.
Right.
I wouldn't have, because I don't think I don't need an apology. Me and him, like, his hands are clean on this one. Like, we're good. And again, like, I want to reiterate again, I think he's a phenomenal rep.
I just want to, you know, just like he said, he want to reiterate. I want to reiterate how much of grown man shit that you don't see too much of in this day and time in life, in general conversation. He said he wouldn't accept an apology because as a fighter, he felt that he was taking responsibility, for being in the fight. He's taking responsibility. You win some, you lose some. Somebody said it. Somebody said that shit. You win some, you lose some. Somebody made that shit. You hear people you hear so many people around here dropping quotes from other people that may be celebrities as if that's their inspiration in life, right? And listen to Anthony Smith say he wouldn't accept it because he felt like he knows that he's the one that's responsible for the way he looked. It was his fight. He's the one that's in the cage. He don't need anybody just coming there making a pity party. And so we felt sorry for Anthony Smith. You know what? People wasn't doing that when he went 5 rounds with John Jones. You know what I'm saying? And for Jason Herzog to even approach him and apologize for what? Seriously, we've seen some fighters that get beat the fuck down and they walk out of the cage with their team. You know what I'm saying? Their team understands how much punishment their fighter can take. Just like Anthony Smith. He told his team in no way, shape, or form, stop this fight. He was very implicit to that. Don't stop the fight. That's what he said. Don't stop the fucking fight. I don't need you being a liability in my corner. Let me handle the shit. So with Jason Herzog, man, I don't need your apology, man. I got it. Grown man shit. For real. We don't need to talk. You did what you had to do. I did what I had to do. I was in the fight. You were basically a third man in the ring to basically, as your profession, referee the fight, oversee the fight. And if you felt you had to make a command decision, then make the shit. But make it and don't apologize for it.
And I would love to have him in there with me again. Because he's very clear. He stays out of the way. He's quiet. Like Keith Peterson is another guy that I really enjoy too, because like they don't insert themselves. Big Dan is good. Like nothing changes.
You spoke
in
to
a group
about
test.
this?
Nothing
Okay.
changes. Like, and you can ask them about it. Like
About the criticism, you mean?
What? Yeah, they're just, and it's not their fault. Like what were they supposed to do? Like really, stop the fight, and then I fire them all?
And they knew that.
Yeah. I reiterated it yesterday. Nothing changes.
Y'all hear what he said?
Group
about
test. Nothing
Okay.
changes. Like, and you get
The stoppage and the length of the fight, all that and more. We will address it today with
not like the real world. Like I don't know if everybody knows that, but who gives a shit what people say on Twitter? Like who cares?
Hold up. Let me get back to where I was.
So when Jason Herzog, the referee, who has
But again, I wish I wouldn't have said anything about my team, because like he's great, man. He's really, really good.
So I was just about to ask you, do you in the future, would you ask to not have Herzog ref one of your fights? You just answered.
No need to worry that you guys can't handle it.
So I want to float something your way, and I appreciate the relationship that we have, because I feel like I could be honest with you and you won't hold it against me type of thing. Because, I said to you last year, I think you should have taken the win against John Jones, right? And you.
So before we get into, what Ariel said he told him last year, somehow, it had a delay and skipped back. But what he was saying is if his corner would have stopped the fight, he would have fired them all. Now, I don't think he's being one of these big-headed type of dudes that's trying to prove a point and look a certain way on here. He's pretty much has his ups and downs in mixed martial arts, period. He's fought. He's faced adversity. He was not too long ago in a battle, to defend his life and his family from an intruder. You know what I'm saying? So this dude is not faking the funk trying to be somebody that he hasn't earned in life. He's a tough dude. He's a different type of dude. He's not the most exciting type of dude to watch, the exciting type of fighter to watch when it comes to charisma and everything in the fight game. But listen to him speak. I know he's that type of guy. He's willing to do anything for his family. He understands totally what his profession is. He knows how good he is. He knows how bad he is. But one thing be clear. I did not stutter when I asked, I'm speaking as a third person to him. I did not stutter when I told my corner, who I am paying to train me and everything else, I made it perfectly clear, do not stop the fight. So he's basically saying if they would have went against that shit and stopped the fight, he would have fired all of them. And that's tough to hear for some people. But I really don't want to, kind of cross-thread sports when it comes to that. But that's somewhat like the same rumblings that was going on with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. You know what I'm saying? Like the code or the language was, don't stop the fight. Let me fight. Let me fight. Let me go out on my shield. Wilder wasn't the only fighter to ever say that shit. Plenty of fighters say, let me go out on my shield. And that's pretty much the mentality and the warrior spirit that Anthony Smith has. What's going on, Fat Dad? How you feel, man? Thanks for dropping in as always, man.
In so many words, called me a sissy as well for doing that. And I respect it. I didn't take it personal, but I feel like you should have taken it. He did something illegal. It wasn't your fault. It was a big fight. You should be the champion in that moment. And so you can make a strong case, and I can make that case because I feel like you should have won that fight because of the illegal knee, that your corner should have advised you in that moment because you were probably a little bit out of it at that point because you were hit with the illegal knee. Hey, man, take the belt. Live to fight another day as a champion. We'll make a lot of money. This is good for your career. Warrior spirit, all that stuff, that doesn't put food on your family's table in 5 years, right? But being a light heavyweight.
So let me tell you this. You just heard what Ariel say. Ariel is one of those guys who's never competed in combat sports. And I agree with certain layers of what he talk about sometime and other layers I don't, right? But for him to basically say to a guy who does have the warrior spirit, not to sit down and say, you know what? It's the opportune time for me to pick up a belt and become champion. He's the type of guy that may have not understood what Timothy Bradley had to go through when he earned the win over Pacquiao, when he really didn't win. And the people and the fans vilified him for it. You know what I'm saying? That was giving him death threats and everything else. He really don't understand potentially what could happen if Anthony Smith would indeed won the title that way. Because mixed martial art fans, they're quite different than boxing fans, but in similarities when it comes down to them expecting certain things from fighters, doing little shit like that, where you're taking the easy way out just to say, oh, well, I'm a champion right now. So-and-so did something illegal, and I'm going to goddamn hold this belt. You're not going to gain any more fans that way. The only ones that may be cheering for you is the ones that's internal to your household. Because once they take the social media, the same place that he just said, Anthony Smith said, this is not reality. Ariel, he doesn't really understand that. He's media. He's outside looking in, and he can sit up here and inject any type of narrative that he want to say, yeah, you could have just taken the belt. A lot of people say, man, that's fuckboy shit right there. Like, nah, motherfucker, that's not the way you do it. You earn it the right way. You know what I'm saying? You earn it the right way. A lot of people were saying the same thing about Matt Hamill when Matt Hamill was DQ'd from John Jones' 12-6 elbow. A lot of people was up here saying, man, Matt Hamill, you was getting blasted, son. No way were you going to win that fight against John Jones. But once again, it's easy for Ariel to say, being a good guy or whatever he wanted to say, it doesn't feed your family. So in certain cases, people do take the mentality, by all means necessary, get the bag, right? But that only applies in certain situations. It only applies in certain situations. And you know what? It's too motherfucking complex to get into on what's applicable in that particular narrative. Do whatever it takes. Being a good guy, don't feed the family. But see, Ariel, he's talking to a guy that's actually a warrior, and he's basically telling him, you know what? You should have took the easy way out, homie. You should have just went up there, didn't get up, even though you could, because he proved that he can fight on, and that's what you should have did. But Ariel is not thinking about all the aftermath that Anthony Smith would have had to deal with. He would have had to deal with so much backlash, vitriol, people excoriating him in the media, that it would have affected him a lot more than him just saying, yeah, I get to come in here and make a heavier bag because I'm champion, and I go down in history for finally becoming a world champion in mixed martial arts. Ariel's not thinking about what the family has to deal with. It's easy for him to sit up here and inject that into Anthony Smith, but the good thing about it, his veins are different. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to sit up here and listen to Ariel say some of the soft-hearted gestures that he mentions and then say, yeah, I totally get it, Ariel. I get it. Matter of fact, give me a goddamn screen hug. Please. Please, that's all I need. You're not going to get that from Anthony Smith.
The way champion does. And so you can make a case that the corner failed you that night a year ago, and they failed you last Wednesday, right? In my opinion.
Actually, in the John fight, they wanted me to not continue.
Really?
Not because they wanted me to steal the belt or anything. They knew I was hurt.
Yeah.
And they knew that I was compromised and that I wasn't going to be going back as strong as I was. And it wasn't like, you need to sit down, you can't continue. It was very much a like, are you okay? Like, don't keep going if you're not okay.
Right.
So once again, not to be so technically nagging or whatever, you know what I'm saying, when it comes to just putting technicality in verbiage and everything, right? When grown people are speaking. But his corner asking him, if you're not okay, you don't have to continue. And then, Ariel saying, well, your corner failed you twice, without actually knowing what his corner did or did not say. Here we go again. You don't know what his corner told him. Now he's finding out. He's basically saying his corner failed him twice. After the man has already emphasized that he made it implicit. Look, made it perfectly clear, don't stop the fight. And he's still saying his corner failed him twice. You know what I'm saying? What am I missing? What am I missing about this shit? Once again, his corner is asking him, hey, you don't have to continue if you don't have. Hey, his corner won a world champion too. All right, his team won a world champion. You don't have to continue if you can't. You don't have to. Come on, Smith. If you don't feel like it, if you compromise, sit it out. Get the belt. That's in how you put it. What would be the perfect words? That's like asking a leading question. You know what I'm saying? It's almost rhetorical in a sense, where you're basically saying to your fighter, I'm not telling you can quit right now because you basically have a reason. You're not able to have full strength than potentially you would have had if you didn't get hit with the illegal knee. So since he hit you with the illegal knee and it's a championship fight, you earn a lot more value just by ending the fight right now and returning a different day. Who gives a fuck about right now anymore? Let's just worry about picking up the title, give John Jones his second loss, and then come back and you make a much more heavier purse. But once again, Anthony Smith ain't cut like that, bro.
It was a lot of questions. Like, are you sure you're okay? But they won't let you talk to your corner. So it's a lot of yelling from where they're sitting. But I don't think that I don't think they would have. I think that they wanted me to be 100% and be not compromised illegally moving forward. I didn't give them the option.
And I'm not trying to suggest being a weasel per se, but
oh, absolutely, Ariel, absolutely, that's what it is. Absolutely. Weasel is exactly what you was attempting to infer. that he take the easy way out, even though he may have been hurt. But it's a lot of times in a fight you get hurt. And just say, for instance, it's not a championship on the line. Do you fight through it? Just say if you win that fight, you get a championship bout. You get a championship fight with the champ. Say, for instance, John Jones wasn't the champ. Do you even take these into consideration? Do you line it up the same? Is your whole thought process the same? No, right? But since it's a championship on the line, area is going to imply. I wasn't saying you could weasel. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Take the weasel way out. If you can still fight on like the warriors before you.
Product of the illegal knee, right? Like, hey, I'm here to protect my guy. I've been put in this spot to protect my guy. He pays me. I need to look out for his best interest so that he's not hurting in 10 years. And so, hey, if a byproduct of saying we can't continue is winning the belt and winning all this money, then great. That's a nice thing. But that should be, in my opinion, the mindset for the main event at UFC 240 whatever, or the first fight of the night at UFC 240 whatever. And so I was just wondering, it just sounds to me, to basically say this in a roundabout way, in some cases, it seems like the corner is in charge once the fight starts. But when it's Anthony Smith in his fight, you have explicitly, and I don't think a lot of people know this, and I think it's important to know, you have told the coaches and your cornermen, you are in charge. Anthony Smith is in charge. Don't you dare stop this fight for good reasons or bad reasons, to win the belt, to take money. I am the one who wants to go out on my shield, essentially, is what you've told them. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of fighters say that.
Yeah, 100. Well, and that's kind of what I'm finding out. Like, I thought everyone, I thought that was normal. I thought that was kind of like just a normal thing.
No.
I guess it's not. And again, maybe it was normal with, the kind of the older guard of guys. I mean, even my old buddy Chael was furious.
I haven't heard him that mad in quite some time, and he was
me
furious.
either. And then I had to, I shot him a text that night, like, "Come on, Chael, calm down, chill out." and I know, again, it comes from a place of caring. So I want to keep saying that. Like, I appreciate it. I really do. Like, I really, how far I can push. Like, I know how deep I can dig if I really need to.
He said he know how far he can push, and he know how far he can dig if he has to. He knows how far he can push, and he knows how far he can dig if he has to. That's very important, because he's basically saying, I know me. Everybody's pain level is different. You know what I'm saying? And dependent on the history of a certain fighter and certain historic fights that they've been in, people will give them that pass. They would say, so-and-so's been in a tough fight. The referee may even say, they've been in tough fights. Let them fight on. Let them fight on. But if you don't have that history, you know what I'm saying? If you don't have the reputation of being in a battle and handling yourself pretty good, certain people have seen you face adversity and then fight up out of it. They may not know what to say. They may not know what to do. You know what I'm saying? So the first time, if they actually witness you in that particular situation and you're not looking like you're surviving, or you have a couple of minutes that you may recover, they're giving you the benefit of the doubt, and you're not seeming like you want to cross that finish line, they may indeed stop the fight because they feel that you're incapable of being that person. You're not tough enough. I don't have any type of reference to say this person is tough enough for me to let this fight go on while they taking punishment. Should I stop it? Let me give them a little bit more time, Boom, stop it. But then you're going to have people saying, well, that was an early stoppage. You should have let it go on. That was premature. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't taking that much punishment. Man, these referees have a hard job.
And again, I've done it before, and I've just, I know everything about myself. I know that sounds stupid, but I know what I can handle. Like, I know how much I can take. I don't know that about other people. So,
how does your wife feel about this mentality?
She's on board because that's the supportive thing to do.
Right.
She doesn't necessarily enjoy it, but she's going to support me in anything,
Right.
And I think I just,
You know, only certain people can ask questions like that. Only certain people can ask questions about a fighter who's contending in the arena, right? Arena of their profession that requires punishment to be delegated, right? Inflicted upon one another. And yes, it has repercussions and ramifications, all that shit over a period of time. Then you include the wives, the ones who link up with these fighters in one of the toughest sports, what they have to deal with in the household. But only certain people can ask questions like that. And I think it's the people that people look at as non-threatening. What is your wife? What does your wife think about, this whole deal? What does she think? Now, me, I know damn well if I was to ask one of these fighters, black fighters, of course, man, what your wife think about when you got dropped in that round? What do your wife think about that? What do your wife think about when you took 20 unanswered punches and you was stumbling all over the ropes and bobbing back and forth, and your head was just bouncing? What did your wife think about that? You know what I'm saying? It would be a different type of energy. I can guarantee you that. But Ariel, he's been in the game. He can ask those questions because they see Ariel is non-threatening. You know what I'm saying? I don't think people will ever see me like that. It was like, nigga, what you asked that question for then? You being disrespectful. Why are you bringing my family into it? And they don't understand it's journalism. You know what I'm saying? It's journalism. Everybody's journalism is different, especially according to the platform that you're on. Everyone's journalism is different. What I do understand about these particular platforms and talking about combat sports is that not how I grew up, but what's actually ongoing right now in life and what has cultivated over a period of time. You have individuals that are social media centric. And just because you call your media outlet boxing this, MMA this, some people can get on here and talk about off-topic discussions that just has to do with regular bullshit. Just talking about hoes, talking about goddamn going to the club, the strip club, doing whatever, drinking, just up here chilling. And people want to tune in and listen to that shit. It's not even talking about boxing and MMA or whatever the descriptive channel may imply that they're covering all the time. That's what type of shit, that's what type of social media environment we in right now. And I understand that. I totally get it. But I myself, I'll fuck around every now and then and talk about some shit. But I like to kind of keep it on subject and talk about stuff even when it's not the most interesting to talk about. That don't mean I'm dumb to it. You know what I'm saying? I can't talk about the same freaking fighter all the time. People are going to look at this video very minimal because it's Anthony Smith, and they really don't want to tune into it. But it's a historic fight because it is the third fight that happened in the pandemic, and it did receive some backlash. And you would have individuals or journalists always refer to this fight for its own reasons, because Anthony Smith did take some punishment, and people thought the fight went a little bit too long. It was overextended. And the backlash that some of his compeers gave him, such as Daniel Cormier, Paul Felder, you know what I'm saying, Michael Bisping, a lot of his compeers gave him backlash, and he wasn't expecting that shit.
I think it's a bigger issue that sometimes the cornermen have to, like if people want things to change, I don't think it's fair that you put that on the cornermen, that they have to be worried about protecting their fighter and trying to help them win at the same time. Those two things kind of go against each other. Like I talked to John Hackleman on the phone yesterday. Who's Glover's?
So John Hackleman, right, is Glover's trainer, Glover Teixeira's trainer. And call it sportsmanship or respect, a rapport, or whatever you want to call it. But John Hackleman been in the game for quite some time. He's Glover Teixeira's trainer, and he's talking about the communication that they happen between the two. Just tune in.
Coach.
Yeah.
And like that guy stops fights way too early.
Right.
And he knows it. And he admits it, because he just cares too much. And so like, there's people that are on the opposite end of that too, where some guys can't take it at all.
Did he call you or you call him?
He texted me and I called him.
Oh, wow. Text you for what?
The chit chat.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
Yeah. And
see, that's what I like about how certain people do certain things. I'm not saying it has to do with ethnicity, anything like that, but you don't see it too often. Communication is transpiring from the opposite team, contacting the fighter that's just lost, just checking in on to see how everything. I'm pretty sure it happened, more times than it's not mentioned, more times enough, right? But just automatically, for you to be in such a tough fight, teeth knocked out, cauliflower ear split, blackened eyes and everything else. And the trainer from the team the fighter who delegated that punishment, sends the fighter a text, man, to chat it up. That just doesn't transfer like that all the time.
And Glover is as well. What about that sequence? Do you remember him apologizing to you?
Yeah. I didn't know what he was apologizing for. I didn't. I was just like, yeah, that's why my response was what it was, because I didn't know what he was apologizing for. But and maybe I got too much of that warrior spirit, and maybe someday it's going to bite me in the ass. But I feel like if your corner stops the fight, I feel like the fighter gets a clean win stolen from you.
Wow. It's an interesting mentality. I mean, again, you were alluding to the fact that people can't fathom doing what you guys do. I'm one of those people. That's why I have so much respect for you guys. I always thought that the corner is there to not only guide you and coach you, but to also protect the fighter. That's been my
interesting mentality, Ariel says. An interesting mentality. What he believes a corner is always there to do. And the people that's close to the sport totally understands that every corner is different. Every corner is different. I've seen boxers who corners are there and they have limitations. There's only so much they're going to say. That fighter is going to do and say what the hell they want to say during fight week, and they corner just sit there quiet as a mouse. And then you have some corners that'll move their fighter away from a situation that's not really a good look for them. It's not healthy. And they'll say, man, get your ass over here. Let's go. We don't have time for that. We got a fight to attend to. That's our focal point. Seriously, it happens all the time. So it's no one protocol for a corner that's across the board that is applicable, and you see it in that light all across the board, that these corners are supposed to be in charge and their best interest is the fighter. And then time the fighter gets in trouble, they go over there and stop the fight. But a lot of people really don't take into consideration post-fight. They going back into the dressing room. They have to have another conversation. Like, man, the fighter is telling the trainer, I felt a certain way that I can continue. And then the trainer's like, no, man, you was taking punishment. And the fighter's like, I'm the one fighting, you're not. I could have continued. Now you have a contentiousness. Now you have an animus. You have a point of distrust that really pretty much breaks up the cohesiveness that's supposed to be in a team. That's real. It's easy for us to be on the outside and say, well, the team's supposed to be there to protect the fighter. Each and every time that fighter goes in there to contend, that is what their position is. Well, also you have to understand the fighter is paying the trainers. So if the fighter who is in there contending, if the fighter doesn't get paid, then more times, 9 times out of 10, the team isn't going to get paid if they don't fight. So the fighter's in there fighting, they get a paycheck for which the residual trickles down to the team. But when it comes to the authority it's different across the board. It's real different. Some fighters like to have that control, and they provide those orders of instructions to their team. Don't you dare violate it, or don't you attempt to go against the grain in the spirit of the moment when I'm in there contending. After what I told you, if I say don't stop the fight, don't stop the fucking fight. Now, of course, that all depends on who's the fighter is. It's no way that you could have told me Maxim Dadashev would have been able to convince Buddy McGirt to allow that fight to continue. That's a different circumstance where Dadashev was saying, no, he's a neighboring fighter from all the way over here from Russia, I believe, fighting for his family. And of course, when these neighboring fighters come over here, they want to put on a good show. And it was one of those situations where, was the fighter down and out? Was he rolling around on the canvas? Or was it just a lopsided fight? And Buddy McGirt, being the fighter that he was previously, what he was seeing ringside, he said, you know what? This is not good. I got to stop the fight. That's a special case. Well, what I'm talking about doesn't apply. You know what I'm saying? It wouldn't apply for Dadashev because it's just not enough history there for Dadashev to prove to Buddy McGirt saying, let me go. Let me work. It just wasn't there, especially with the fighter he was facing. It just wasn't enough reference for him to say, okay, all right, Maxim. Could you imagine Buddy would have let him go back in there and he would have died in the ring? If they would have had that conversation on the stool and Buddy's pleading and trying to get him to understand and allow him to go for one more round, and he would have died in the ring. It's a tough call to make, man. It's a tough call to make. These fighters, they give implicit orders, and that's what they want. And then on the other hand, you might have a fighter that's over there debating with the corner and saying, I feel good, I can keep going. And they're worse off than we thought.
Thought process when it comes to their job. And so I actually like it when I see a corner stop the fight, because it's like, wow, these guys really care. I know it's a ballsy move. They'll probably hear from the fighter in the back, because we've seen situations like Czech Congo and Pat Barry, right? Or Pete Sell and Scott Smith, like crazy turnaround, finishes. But
and those two things are 10 years apart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not even like it happens that often. So
Right.
I get it. Like when Duke Rufus stopped Pettis and Tony Ferguson, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I thought that was amazing. I thought that was amazing because how much balls it takes to stop a fight like that, knowing what's on the line and what kind of incredible fight those guys were in. I admire that. I just don't want any part of it.
That's amazing. Did you talk to the UFC brass afterwards, Dana White?
So what he just said was he thought what Duke Rufus did when Anthony Pettis was facing Tony Ferguson, and we all seen that fight. It was a wild fight, and Rufus stopped the fight. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Pettis did inform them that his hand was broken for him to stop the fight. If I'm not mistaken, everything I'm saying is not, it can't be verbatim or whatever, but from my reflection, I believe that exactly what happened. And when it comes to Duke Rufus, man, it's a whole different story. Dude's been in the game for quite some time, a martial artist himself, a fighter himself. So I don't think Anthony Pettis is going to question or feel some type of way about Rufus stopping the fight, even if it meant it was a big fight for him against Tony Ferguson. There's nothing going to be said. But Anthony Smith basically told us that he thought it was cool. You know what I'm saying? But he just don't think it's cool for him. Isn't that, can everybody deal with that type of idiosyncrasy? You know what I'm saying? Can anybody deal with that type of odd mentality that he has? I don't want it for me, but when I see it for others in a certain situation, I say, okay, that was a smart move. That was good. I understand why he stopped the fight. All right, cool. But just don't do that shit for me. Just don't do it for me. Don't stop. Hey, I kind of goddamn hit the thumbs up button when it's somebody else, but don't do that shit for me.
Anyone there? What did they say about the fight?
Yeah, they've called me a couple times, just checking on me, which again is kind of another weird thing. I'm like, why do you guys keep calling me? I'm good. Hunter reached out, Dan called, Maynard's checked on me, and I work with a lot of the people, and if it's a main event, it's a main event. I doubt I get one for a little while, but
check this out now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. I no later than September, sure. And I think there's a lot of intriguing. I broke my nose in the John Jones fight and fought Gus 6 weeks later.
Yeah. 3 months, actually, to be exact. It was March to June, right?
No, it's like 6 weeks.
Fine, fair enough. I'm not going to argue with you about it. But, okay, so you want to come back quickly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. No later than September, sure.
So this man's talking about Anthony Smith coming off a tough loss where he did take punishment. We're in May, so he want to come back no later than September. So you're talking about June, July, August, him being out for a little bit to rest up and then getting back in, I would say an 8-week training camp. He has enough time. It's not as, short as we look at it. We just look at it right now because it's fresh in our memory. But him saying he want to get back in there in September, it's like, oh man, that's too soon. Well, sometimes for fighters, they heal up, right? They're used to the routine. They have certain ways that they can heal their bodies quickly. And, outside of crowd therapy and certain other things, right? And we see them all bruised up. Like I said, his cauliflower ear split open, black eyes, teeth missing. His teeth been replaced, they're veneers. But, just the whole visual aesthetics that was all wrong for Anthony Smith. And then he said he wanted to return in September. Now, we don't even have a clue who that would be against, to be honest, because now Anthony Smith, he has 15 losses. But we do understand in mixed martial arts, that really has very minimal value when it comes to certain fighters. Very minimal value when it comes to double-digit losses. And I kind of like that. I do. I kind of like that when it comes to mixed martial arts to a point. This is why. Because you have certain fighters that have a name for themselves, that they may have double-digit losses, but unless you followed them early on in their career and kind of see and understand who they fought and had those losses with, what was going on in that period, it all depends, why they was taking these fights. Because truth be told, y'all, these fighters, to a certain extent, back then they really wasn't getting paid that much. And still the UFC is still pretty much, one of those organizations that have they have scrutiny placed on them for the fighters' pay, for the amount of punishment that they go in there and contend for. The paychecks doesn't register in its equity up to boxing, so to speak. So a lot of people are upset. They have something to say about these fighters, fighting for pennies, which is not for me to say. The only thing I disliked about it is when Reebok came on deck and really monopolized the UFC in basically depleting or extracting fighters from having collateral sponsors. Because I used to love those banners coming over the top rope. The fighters were able to make hundreds, if not thousands of dollars outside of the UFC when they had that sponsorship. But when Reebok came in here with this very dense scale of payouts that they provide according to what tier the fighter is on, I still don't think it compared to the sponsorship. Because if you take a fighter that has like 10 or 15 sponsorships, that may supersede the little tier payout that Reebok is giving them in the first place. Seriously, that's how I think about it. That's how I think of it. I really think they benefited. They would have still benefited a lot more having sponsorship. And for a lot of people, you wouldn't have seen them out of the UFC right now. You know, you wouldn't see them in neighboring organizations. You wouldn't see them out, period. It's just tough to kind of provide for your family and make a living when you have a tier structure for Reebok, and then according to where you at with the pay scale as a fighter in the UFC, that all depends, people. That all depends what your check is like. I remember when I put a Reebok payout up here, right? Because you don't have a lot of media outlets that talk mixed martial arts and boxing, right? So I guess, you know, these certain individuals listen to me talk about boxing, and I put up an MMA pay scale. And these individuals actually believe that that was all the money. I put up a Reebok tier payout for that particular fight card, and it was very minuscule, right? And these people was like, man, damn, them mixed martial artists, they stupid as shit for taking that low payout. And then you had some people that follow mixed martial arts. They were saying, hey, man, you don't know what the fuck you talking about. That's not all they got paid. They said they get paid. And I was trying to tell them, I had to sit up there and literally go at like 20 some people and tell them, how long have you been following the sport? This is just a Reebok payout of what the fighters receive. This is for your identity to help you understand, y'all. For you to identify the internal aspects on how the pay scale work. This is not what they're getting paid with the bag. This is a smaller portion of the sponsorship that Reebok has agreed upon internal to the organization. So the money is very small. And I had to sit up there and goddamn tell, man, why don't y'all go look at this source? I'm gonna be dropping sources in the comment section. I say, y'all don't know about this shit? Y'all don't know, you know, the tier level? Y'all don't know about the actual pay that the fighters get? Man, go a little bit more in detail with your due diligence. You know what I'm saying?
And I think there's a lot of intriguing matchups, you know? I think there's, you know, maybe it'd be nice to get some positive byproducts, you know? I mean, I bet Corey Anderson's licking his lips right now.
Or maybe you could get Luke Rockhold out of retirement.
Listen, they're both coming off of losses. This is a
So I'm just gonna leave it like that. They just talking about future matchups. And you know, they mentioned Corey Anderson, who's on the rise. That'll actually be a pretty good matchup, Corey Anderson and Anthony Smith. And of course, Luke Rockhold, not for me. Luke Rockhold, he's really confused on what he wants to be. I'm not sure he's dedicated 100% to be a mixed martial artist. When you're a model and everything, and you have an outside life, and you pretty much invested in, you know, being a playboy and everything, it's hard for you to go in here and win the big fights. You know what I'm saying? You know, the process for which he faced Michael Bisping, tough loss. You know what I'm saying? And then he's supposed to go over there, and what would have kind of catapulted him to a different level if he would have went there and defeated Yoel Romero, a loss. Not to mention Yoel Romero giving him the Tyson Fury special at the end. Whatever he was doing, hugging and kissing freaking Luke Rockhold. I mean, it just, I don't know why his name even came up. I wouldn't want Anthony Smith to face Luke Rockhold, who has been, you know, getting dropped every now and then. And I totally don't think his entire focus is being the best mixed martial artist he can. Now, that's not the question. His skill set, his jiu-jitsu game is one of the best in the business. You know, he has a smooth, slick question mark kick. You know, and his stand-up game isn't that bad. He has skills. Now, his chin is what is questionable. You know what I'm saying? His chin. Seriously. Just look at the fight with him and Vitor Belfort. Check it out. Spin the reel. Luke Rockhold's up there standing like a freaking Sears mannequin against Vitor Belfort, who did a spinning heel kick, I believe. I mean, come on, bro. Like, the man has had some questionable decisions in his career that leads me to say, you know, is he truly dedicated to the sport? Or is he truly dedicated to being a model and a playboy? You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm getting at. But anyway, enough of that. Salute to the Warrior, Anthony Smith, man. In your loss. Salute to Glover Teixeira. Very good fight. You know, my take on it is what it is. I told you before. The referee stopped it. It's the fight game. And I looked at the fight over and over again. And I saw Anthony Smith trying to make adjustments, even off his back, trying to escape, defending, putting his guard up, you know, to not get punched in the face and take extensive damage while on his back. Turning over, sometimes basically exposing, giving his back up, you know, so he wouldn't take punishment to the face. He was trying different measures of transitions, man, to help himself out. He was still competent enough, but it wasn't enough because Glover Teixeira was relentless. He kept the pressure up. So I got to give a salute to Glover Teixeira for doing what he had to do. That's what he's supposed to do. And I got to give it up to Anthony Smith for being a tough SOB. And much respect for him just having that grown man mentality. You know what I'm saying? Of course, it's not going to be a lot of people. It's going to be some people that agree with what I say and then some that don't. But what I do encourage you to do is continue to tune into the channel. You know what I'm saying? This is my Muddy Flats episode number 7. Muddy Flats absolutely is mixed martial arts because everything about it just has so many facets and variables to the game. You know what I'm saying? And for those in the sport, understand exactly what that means, Muddy Flats. Exactly what it means. It means if you just give it a thought process, it'll all come together. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. And in closing, I want to talk about Alistair Overeem. He also did an interview, right? And you know, they was kind of asking what he said to Walt Harris. And he was saying that, you know, it was such a tragic situation and tough to come back to the sport, having that situation of a death in the family and the way it went down. And he was just consoling Walt Harris in the time immediately after he defeated him, right? But what I appreciated about Alistair Overeem is this. I respect wholeheartedly. And I was questioning. I was like, come on, man. I seen Alistair when he was freaking 3-4 times bigger than what he is now. Like Alistair Overeem, I saw him in person back then when he was in kickboxing. Like, dude looked like an absolute totally different transformer. He looked like an absolutely superhero. You could see cuts, muscles from everywhere. And I don't know what the testing was back then, but I'm just telling you, overseas, man, it was amazing time for some of them fighters that fall over there. But anyway, Alistair Overeem is like sitting in like over 90 fights. So the question was asked, you know, after he had mentioned that he want to have like 4 more fights and get out. And of course, it was insinuated, well, if that will put you at this number, 96 or whatever the case may be, right? Don't you want to just have 100 even? And I hope he sticks to it. He said, no, I don't need 100 even. I've been in the game for a long time. And, you know, I mean, I totally understand what I've compiled over the years, my experience, my body of work. I mean, extensive. Listen, y'all, how many fights that Alistair Overeem has been in, and he's still able to talk. He's still able to comprehend cognizant factors, you know, all of that is still registering for him right now. So for him to say, I don't need 100 fights even, just to say, you know, it looks good. But he said, you know, 4 fights, and I want to call it quits. Now, he did say this also, if he wins all 4 fights, that would be a different story. But if he's talking about climbing up the ranks, I don't know if that's a reasonable outlook for Alistair Overeem. I'm not saying it's impossible for him to accomplish it, but I'm saying I just don't see the outlook as being reasonable after what we've seen. You know what I'm saying? We seen him take that uppercut from Ngannou. We've seen Alistair knocked out several other times. We've seen Rosenstruck, who was just obliterated by Ngannou in one freaking round, go over there and split Overeem's lip open, in which Overeem was winning the fight, in my opinion. So you look at it in that perspective, with him getting this win over Walt Harris. Who's next? Are they going to attempt to give him a higher, ranked opponent, so to speak, or a bigger name to see how it plays out? Because just say, for instance, he has 4 more fights. And just say the next 2 fights, he's knocked out one of those 2 fights. Let's just say he wins the next one and he's stopped in the second one. But his goal is to have 4. So he has 2 more fights. In mixed martial arts in the UFC, I'm pretty sure they will let him fight those 2 fights out. Even if he get knocked out, he win the next fight and get knocked out the next one, they may potentially allow him to have 2 other fights and then retire, because he's earned it. He's earned the process to make that decision. As long as he's been in combat sports, as long as he's been competing, the respect that he has amongst fight fans, you know what I'm saying? All over the world, man, all over the world. The man's been around, unfucking believable. But yeah, combat sports, man, it is a unique sport. It's a love-hate relationship, and it's always going to be like that. You know what I'm saying? It's always going to be like that. You're always going to have people that talk about certain fighters, and the listener will believe all of it because they pretty much gravitate to the voice and the messenger, right? And then you have other people that may talk about that specific fighter, and the fans aren't gravitating too much. They're not all, magnetized, because they're not really paying attention. They want the other side, they want the more hoopla. You know what I'm saying? They want you to sit up here and say certain things about certain fighters. And look, believe it or not, in this type of era of media, you have people that tune in to you if you talk about the same fighter all the time. That's real talk. And that's why I never have that fan base if you want me to talk about the same fighter all the time. If you want me to just talk about black fighters all the time. If you want me to talk about just Mexican fighters, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. I never have the 300 views at one time if that's what they're looking forward to. Now, it's easy for me to say, well, World Combat Sports is just a boxing channel. My shit will be on point. I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter to me. Seriously. I'm not going to sit up here and redirect and just reconstruct everything, do away with talking about mixed martial arts because of the fan base of my audience is not willing to say, okay, what is he talking about today? Boxing and MMA. I know it can be complex. It's all good, but just stick with me. Just stick with me. If you have input, drop your input. It's all good. But I'm going to continue to do my research. I'm going to continue to talk about both sports because it is fascinating on both sides of the spectrum. Boxing and mixed martial arts, very motivated, to find out more and more about the sport. So I know this has been one of those topics where people are like, Anthony Smith, but you have to talk about, if you're not on the ESPN and you have certain people you have to talk about, it's okay to sit up here and talk about stuff like that. It's educational. And plus, show love to the fighters that aren't, in the brightest of spotlights. Show them some love. It's all good. But that's all I got, man. Let me see what else. I keep seeing this Conor McGregor, Manny Pacquiao shit floating around. Conor McGregor, Manny Pacquiao. Conor McGregor is trying his best trying his best to get another boxing match. And what I was trying to tell some individuals, like, Conor McGregor used to box amateur, all right? And he just basically made a decision that he wanted to be a mixed martial artist. Now, when he came onto the UFC, he already had 2 losses. And while he's been in the UFC, he's earned 2 losses. And if you know who those 2 losses was against, it was the first bout between him and Nate Diaz at 170. It wasn't for a belt or anything, but he was current champion at the time. Conor McGregor was the featherweight champion. And then he moved up for a money fight because everybody was talking about it. You know, Nate Diaz was talking, you know, he wanted Conor McGregor because the Diaz brothers was doing it before Conor McGregor even started to flourish. So he moved up to 170. It was one of those bragging rights type of shit. So the 2 fought, he subbed them out via RNC. Then they had a rematch. Conor McGregor won by decision, and then he dropped back down to lightweight 155 to face Eddie Alvarez. Now, in the process of being champion, he was able to go and fight Floyd Mayweather. I have to put this out there, right? Conor McGregor put out a Twitter. He put out a tweet, rather. He put out a tweet and said he was winning the early rounds. He was having success in the early rounds. Which a lot of us could say, okay, yeah, he was having success in the early rounds. Because put it this way, if Floyd Mayweather would have went in there and dispersed or how you put it? What's the word? Suspended Conor McGregor from the fight in 2 or 3 rounds, people would have been running to the parking lot trying to find out what Floyd limo is going to be. And they would have freaking tore up the place inside because it would have been too easy. They would have thought it was a setup. So for Floyd Mayweather to carry Conor McGregor needs to understand that he was carried. And a lot of gullible individuals that call themselves true hardcore boxing fans really fell for that Conor McGregor coming over to boxing and potentially giving Floyd Mayweather his first loss. Now, you have people that follow boxing for quite some time. They actually believe a mixed martial artist that's 0-0 in the sport of boxing, of course he got approved for a license, will come over here and defeat one of the best defensive fighters and offensive tacticians in the sport of boxing, Floyd Mayweather. One who has perfected his craft. All of a sudden, Mr. Ireland himself, the notorious one, will come over here, no boxing experience on a professional level, and give Floyd Mayweather his first loss. It wasn't going to happen. So for him to come over here and say he was winning the early rounds, this, that, and the other, and trying to talk up that shit, I'd be surprised if fans even try to go for that shit again, to say, yeah, we want to see Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather again. I'd be surprised if they give in to that. Now, for Floyd Mayweather facing Manny Pacquiao, I truly cannot say without a shadow of a doubt that the fans would be like, let's tune into it anyway. You know why? Because the way Manny Pacquiao looked his last fight. If by chance that fight presents itself, just say, for instance, because right now, Conor McGregor is far away from stepping back in there with Khabib Nurmagomedov. He got his opportunity. Khabib subbed him out, just like he did Dustin Poirier, right? Almost damn near the same sub. So in between him getting a big fight, if by chance he's able to go over to boxing, I don't see it anytime soon. But now that Conor McGregor kind of knows the format for which he needs to go about it, will it even happen? Like, will the fans tune in for him and Pacquiao? You know what I'm saying? Will the fans even show interest? I don't know. It's hard to say. I know it's not going to happen anytime soon. I know with Conor McGregor, he'll probably be like, no, we need a gate. I need as much money as possible. You know what I'm saying? For this fight to happen. That's the only way I'm going to do it. I need as much money as possible. And then you look at Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao has extreme say-so. You know what I'm saying? Legend of the sport. Conor McGregor is not going to have any more say so than he did with Floyd Mayweather when he came over here. Point blank, period. You know what I'm saying? So let's see what happens, man. Conor McGregor's trying his best. I know Oscar De La Hoya had made mention that he wouldn't mind, facing Conor McGregor. Oscar De La Hoya really couldn't sell that shit to anybody. Conor McGregor needs to be matched up with somebody that's going to equally trash talk and build a fight up like we want to happen. If that's not the case, people are not going to come to see it. It's just not going to happen. What else? I really hope that John Jones and Francis Ngannou potentially, if it comes down to it, they fight. I would definitely like to see John Jones and Francis Ngannou fight. The reason being, John Jones is considered the GOAT of mixed martial arts. A lot of people consider him one of the best mixed martial artists ever, right? So for Francis Ngannou, who isn't considered that, but he's gaining steam ever so often. He's gaining a little bit of steam, right? They want to compare him to having punching power at a higher rate than Mike Tyson at one point in time. They was building up this guy to be the next big deal until he went in there with Stipe Miocic and just got schooled. Then he slowly but surely built it up. He fought Curtis Blade, did what he had to do. Went in there and had I'm talking about, if you want to talk about a fight that ranks upon the top 5 worst ever in mixed martial arts, is when he stepped in there with Derek Lewis. And they ain't punks. Francis Ngannou and Derek Beast Lewis is not punks. But I'm just saying the way they handled that fight was extremely boring. And it ranks top 5 all-time boring. Just beneath Darren Till and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Just beneath Israel Adesanya and Yoel Romero. And somebody asked me this the other day, say, well, how can you rank, Israel Adesanya and Yoel Romero above that when I think, Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis was worse? Because it was for a championship. For you to go in there and perform that way for a championship, yeah, you have to be in the top 3. You have to be in the top 2. Seriously, you have to. For them to go in there and perform the way they did and talking about you want to be the first one to stop Yoel Romero, and it was quite the opposite. Yeah, it was the second worst fight I ever seen. That's being absolutely real. I have to factor in what was on the line. Okay. But John Jones, man, if Dana White can make this fight, absolutely, let's go. I think it has more traction to it with the pedal to the floor, than John Jones facing Israel Adesanya, because it was a lot exposed with Israel Adesanya. I truly think he's about that life with fighting certain people, that he believes he has that, hey, I want to act like I have more star power than I actually have. I want to make it seem like I have more value to the sport than I've actually earned. And for him to even think that John Jones will come down to middleweight, are you stupid? Like, why would you even jeopardize your credibility and fragment any freaking respect that the fans was tuning in for you to face John Jones by believing, yeah, he just needs to come down here to middleweight and we'll fight. If not, he understands that he needs me. I don't need him. Please. Boy, you crazy? It would have been more respect and more traction to it if you would have said, you know what, I want to move up to damn light heavyweight and face John Jones, man. Let me get off this Yoel Romero fight. Let me get this victory, and then let's talk. But no, he started talking about John Jones coming down to middleweight. Who in their right mind would come to you when you don't even have nowhere close to the body of work of John Jones. What respect I can give to Israel Adesanya is that he's worked himself up to where he's been. But come on, man. You can't sit up here and throw names like Kevin Gastelum. You can't throw names like Robert Whittaker, even though he was the champ. You can't just say, okay, I beat Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero has been defeated in big fights plenty of times before. Robert Whittaker had losses, but you won the belt. I got to give you that. But when you take Kevin Gastelum, who beneath that can we just sit up here and say, hey, those three right there, that ranks him amongst one of the all-time best middleweights we ever seen? I don't think so. You have one defense right now, and you ran through that first defense, and people ain't trying to see that shit no more. I think they want to see your ring entrance, your cage entrance, the fight before than anything else. That's real talk. But anyway, I'm glad John Jones is basically shooting the compass elsewhere in the direction of Francis Ngannou and just leave damn Adesanya alone. Because I don't think Adesanya want that smoke with John Jones. I even said on my live, I said that'll be one of the biggest fights in UFC history. And I still stick by that. If Adesanya fights John Jones at the right time, which is now, next 2 years, you know what I'm saying? You can't keep John Jones on the burner too long. You know what I'm saying? You can't keep him on hold too long. Something may happen. We already seen that shit with the DWI, hit and runs, all that shit. So if Dana White is able to make this shit sometime soon in the next several months, cool. It would be the biggest fight in UFC history. Israel Adesanya facing John Jones at light heavyweight. Because that's the only way it's going to happen. Now, if John Jones faces Francis Ngannou, I believe that fight will do, astronomical numbers. Seriously, I believe that fight would do tremendous. You're talking about John Jones. Obviously, he's gonna be giving up weight. Obviously, size. Francis Ngannou, having the power. And I don't know why people think this is a foreign language when I say the way he won against Rosenstruck wasn't that special. It wasn't anything special about that. He just went out there and blitzed a Rosenstruck who went straight on center, backwards, didn't have his hands up. He met the barrier behind him, and he got clipped with a left hook. And then he got hit with 2 other punches and lights out. What do you expect? Why didn't you freaking move left or right? You had all the access to do that shit. I didn't find the win that spectacular. He blitzed the guy who seemed like he was a little bit skittish, may have been intimidated just a little bit by the size of Ngannou. And when Ngannou blitzed him, swinging those heavy hammers, he helped himself get stopped. So therefore, the light started to shine a little bit more over than Francis Ngannou. People start to turn their head and say, okay, all right. But guess what? True hardcore fans always understand that win wasn't that special. It wasn't like Rosenstruck was previous champion before. So we look at it, we evaluate it, and then we say, well, you still got Stipe out there. You still got DC out there who's about to retire. There's several other fighters that's out there, in my opinion, that's will give Francis Ngannou a problem if presented. But believe it or not, Stipe Miocic rematching Ngannou right now, not before him in DC. So if Dana White can make a big fight between John Jones and Francis Ngannou, let's see it. Let's see it. Until then, hey, y'all turn up and tune in to World Combat Sports. Salute.